Welcome to our study on the book of Romans. This is the Romans Education Part 7, and this is session 55. When we left off last time, we were actually talking about the issue of casting off the works of darkness. We were defining that term. I want to do a little more work in that because, I want to do a little more work on that issue of casting off, because I don't want us to just get a definition in our head and then just kind of just leave it in there like information, but I really need us to see everything that's involved with this. I'm going to give you a couple of more ways that we're going to look at this term, and I think it'll also serve for us to make a parallel application to things that will be happening to us as well. So we're going to start off with the book of Job, and let me give you some context with this. The book of Job is going to be very instructive for the believing remnant once this dispensation of grace has come to an end and Satan's night begins to come to its fullness, and especially, as things began to take up in Daniel's 70th week. And in many ways, Job is a very good type of the believing remnant of Israel. He's in a predicament, and I'm not going to go back and read all the verses. I think almost everyone here probably understands the thing about Job. He lost his possessions, he lost his herds, he lost his children, he lost his servants. His wife finally says, "Why don't you curse God and die?" He's sitting covered with ashes and all of that. So he has gone from great wealth now to great poverty, and he has friends. He has three friends in particular that show up to try to give Job counsel. And they misread the circumstances. They're not really understanding what is going on or why it is going on. And they believe that Job is suffering because he has committed wickedness before God. And they think God is punishing him for that. Job, they believe, could fool men, but he couldn't fool God, and now he's getting, what he really deserved. He may have hid it from them all this time, but he couldn't really hide it from God. And so Job is going to mount a defense. He's going to maintain his innocence, and as he does that, he's going to find himself we're going to find him asking questions about why he is going through this kind of suffering. And we're going to see that he's going to admit to some confusion. He doesn't really understand why things are happening the way they are, and he's going to ask God why. And so with that kind of background in mind, and believe me, this is not just about Job. We are going to be looking at the issue of something being cast off, but I want you to also see that this is going to be a very parallel issue that is going to go along with the believing remnant, who will also be dealing with a cast-off issue. Now, we'll see all of that unfold. So having said that, let's take a look in the PowerPoint at Job chapter 10 and verse 2. "I will say unto God, do not condemn me. Show me wherefore thou contendest with me. Thou knowest that I am not wicked, and there is none that can deliver out of thine hand. Thine hands have made me and fashioned me together round about, yet thou dost destroy me." And so, give me that next slide there, Trent. Okay. "If I sin, then thou markest me, and thou wilt not acquit me from mine iniquity. If I be wicked, woe unto me. And if I be righteous, yet will I not lift up my head. I am full of confusion. Therefore, see thou mine affliction." Now, he starts this thing out by saying, wherefore is this happening to me? I don't really understand. Here at the end, we see that he's saying, I'm full of confusion. Now, there's one thing I want to point out about Job here. I know it's a lesson that we've heard a lot about Job, but the issue of faithfulness for him is that in all of this, even though he understands that this is not because he is a wicked man, Job does not feel like God has betrayed him, and he is not bitter against God. As a matter of fact, let me just take you over to Job 13:15. Job is going to make this statement: "Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him, but I will maintain mine own ways before him." That's a pretty incredible statement when you're going through the suffering, to say, look, I don't understand what's happening. I'm confused about all of this, but I'll tell you this, even if he slays me, I'm still going to trust in him. So I like the attitude that Job has toward this, that's right, but he's really looking for an answer about this. Now, Job makes a speech. Now, I showed you that little bit about Job because after he makes that speech, one of his friends, Zophar, who isn't buying into Job's statements there, then he's going to make a response. So let's take a look at this in Job chapter 11, verse 1. Then answered Zophar the Naamathite and said, should not the multitude of words be answered? And should a man full of talk be justified? Should thy lies make men hold their peace? And when thou mockest, shall no man make thee ashamed? You can see right off the bat, before we continue to read, Zophar hears what Job has to say, and he said, it's not because of wickedness. Lord, you know this. He's going to come along and say, Job, you talk an awful lot. I think somebody deserves to answer what you've said. And so now we pick it up in verse 4. For thou hast said, my doctrine is pure, and I am clean in thine eyes. But oh, that God would speak and open his lips against thee. You know what he's saying? Boy, I tell you what, I wish God could just say what's going on here. You would see, Buster, you're not as clean as you think you are. Verse 6, and that he would show thee the secrets of wisdom, that they are double to that which is. And then look at this statement. Know therefore that God exacteth of thee less than thine iniquity deserveth. He says, you think all this stuff is happening to you? Buddy, you're not getting half of what you ought to get. God's going easy on you here. What does he think Job is? I mean, that's pretty tough words, isn't it? Who does he think he is? Linda says, okay. Verse 13, now look, he's going to make a plea here. If thou prepare thine heart and stretch out thine hands toward him, if iniquity be in thine hand, put it far away, and let not wickedness dwell in thy tabernacles. Now I have to tell you, this sounds so wise, doesn't it? I mean, really, he's saying, look, you know why this is happening to you. Just come clean. If you'll just come clean with this, you can start reversing this. But it's not going to happen till you fess up. That's the kind of counsel, by the way, that people are given today. Some people maintain that if you get sick, it's because you have sin in your life. But you know what? That's not what the Bible will teach you about what's happening in the dispensation of grace. And I have news for you. It's not what's happening with Job either. So that's a pretty tough sell. Now, in chapter 12, Job is going to begin to defend himself against Zophar's accusations. That defense that he's giving him is going to continue over into chapter 13. Now, I want to read just a part of this. And Job, he hears what he's saying. He's saying, oh, that God, remember, would open his lips against you. Oh, if you just knew the wisdom of God. Remember all that? So take a look in Job 13:2. What ye know, this is Job's response now. What ye know, the same do I know also. I'm not inferior unto you. Surely I would speak to the Almighty, and I desire to reason with God. That's the response against, oh, that God would open his lips against you if he'd just tell you what's right. And you know what Job is saying? I wish he would. That's what he said. Verse 4, but ye, notice that's Y-E, that's the plural, that's the three of them. Ye are forgers of lies. Oh, this is escalating a little bit now, isn't it? Because remember what they said? Are we going to let your lies go unanswered? And now he says, you're forgers of lies. You're all physicians of no value. Oh, you came here to help me? You guys aren't helping me at all. Verse 5, oh, that you would altogether hold your peace, which is a very polite way of saying, yeah, that's it. He says, and it should be your wisdom. You guys would look a lot wiser if you just be quiet. Now, as this moves on here, his response is pretty lengthy. It goes all the way on through the next chapter, chapter 14. And then starting in chapter 15, I just need to pick this up, another friend, Eliphaz, he is now going to begin to answer what Job just got through saying. And you're going to tell right off the bat, he's not very impressed with what Job has to say. So here it is, Job 15:1. Then answered Eliphaz the Temanite and said, should a wise man utter vain knowledge and fill his belly with the east wind? Now, I don't want to get into the details too much of this and get sidetracked, but the east wind is a wind of judgment in the Bible. It's always a wind of destruction. And so when he's saying, should a wise man utter vain knowledge and fill his belly with the... He said, you know what you're doing? You're saying things that you're calling wisdom, but you know what? You're reaping all of this. We see what's going on. Verse 3, should he reason with, and here's what he calls Job's response, unprofitable talk, or with speeches wherewith he can do no good? Yea, thou casteth off fear, and restraineth prayer before God. For thy mouth uttereth thine iniquity, and thou choosest the tongue of the crafty. Thine own mouth condemneth thee, and not I. Yea, thine own lips testify against thee. Art thou the first man that was born, or wast thou made before the hills? Hast thou heard the secret of God, and dost thou restrain wisdom to thyself? What knowest thou that we know not? What understandest thou which is not in us? You know what he's doing? He's taking that very thing that Job said. He said, hey, everything you know, I know too. I'm not inferior to you. So they're going, oh, well then you know what? You must know something we don't know. So just tell us, what is it that you know that we don't? Do you see this thing that's going? I mean, I think everybody sees that pretty plainly. Now, the verse that I'm really after is actually going to be found in verse 4. So that's the next verse up. Yea, thou castest off fear and restraineth prayer before God. Here's really what Eliphaz is saying when he says that. Now, by the way, when they say you're casting off fear, remember what we talked about? A public repudiation, remember, was the definition of casting something off. And by the way, Job has been pretty vocal about where he stands on all of this. But they're saying you don't fear God. You're not afraid of him. Well, does Job fear God? He does, but not in the way they want him to. How do they want him to fear God? I've been wicked. I've committed evil. God is judging me. I need to turn from all of that and return to the Lord so he'll stop condemning me. That's the way they want Job to respond to that. And he is not going to. So you know what they're saying? You're all of these things we're saying to you, you're casting all of that off. You're repudiating it like it's not true. And really, they're saying, you know what? God is punishing you. That's the evidence. That's the only evidence you need to see how you really stand before God. All right. Well, everything that's been said up till now really is based on that. Job's lack of fear in the way they think he needs to be fearing God. And so I'm pointing this out for a couple of reasons. Number one, because this is not someone being cast off. This is an idea that's being cast off. And I'll just say, I'll say it this way for now. There are some ideas that you're going to have to cast off as well. You'll encounter them from the policy of evil. I'm just saying it that way because later we're going to bring this back to Paul in Romans 13. And I'm going to try to make an application of this. But what I want to do now is I want to take you to the next place, and that is Psalm 43. Now remember, in the Psalms, you have Psalm 1 to 41, and then you have, I don't need to put all these up here. Let me just put the first ones up here. You have this first psalm, which is remember the Psalms are divided up into these, what we call books. Remember, it was divided into 5 books. And those books have a connection to the 5 mandates of the Davidic covenant. So you have the Redeemer, the Deliverer, the Avenger, and then the king, and the last set would be the blesser. I'm not going to go any further than this because we're going to get everything we need right here. Well, I'm fixing to take you to Psalm 43. Psalm 43 is the second psalm in the deliverer book of the Psalms. And we know what that is. That deliverance is when the Lord begins now to do something for the believing remnant, to keep them from the attack of the man of sin, and what Satan is going to bring against them. And so anyway, you remember, and if we were just put this on a timeline when you come along, let's call this the dispensation of grace. And the cross is back here. And then up here, you have this remaining portion of Satan's night. And then you have Daniel's 70th week, or what we call the tribulation, right? Well, it's in the remaining portion of this night, you see that the deliverer psalms are going to apply. Well, I say they're going to apply. Let me back up and say this. The believing remnant is going to be instructed in something that is going to take place in the remaining portion of this night and in the beginning of Daniel's 70th week. And what is going to be happening is Satan is going to be having his way in the world. His man of sin is going to come on the scene, and that man of sin, the Antichrist, is going to be well received. And what it's going to look like is that Satan has outmaneuvered God. Because the remnant knows there are promises that God is going to be their deliverer. So when all of this now begins to tumble out, there are some persecutions that are going to come against the believing remnant. And they're going to expect God to begin to deliver them. And in the beginning, it's not going to happen. And when that doesn't happen, they're going to have the same kind of statement in their mind and on their lips that Job had. What in the world is going on? Why are these things successful against us? Why are we suffering these things? And you know what? Just like Job said, I have confusion before me. They're going to be saying the same thing. We don't understand. Now that is I'm laying it out like this because that's a very important issue. Because there is a particular lie that is going to be told out here first by the apostate nation. And I mean every single member of the nation of Israel who is not part of the believing remnant. They, along with Gentile nations, are going to put forth a narrative that says the reason you guys are suffering out here is because while you thought you were serving God, you're not. And the proof is, look at how you're suffering. And because everything is going to be going the apostate nation's way, that's going to be the justification for, look how God is rewarding us. By the way, if you were in Israel's program, what do you normally think? If good things are happening to me, I'm doing right, and if bad things are happening to me, it's because I've violated God's law and He's against me. They're going to use that knowledge. And by the way, they're telling this lie, but you have to understand, they believe the lie. And that lie is going to be told over and over again by the members of the nation, and it's even going to be picked up by Gentile nations. Now, I'm going to pull this back into the Romans 13 thing for a moment because we've been talking about the definition when it says cast off the works of darkness. They're going to say to the believing remnant, God has cast you off. And this is His way of publicly disassociating Himself from you and not having anything to do with you. Just go back to the last Tuesday. You remember what we saw? God said, I'm going to cast off this. I'm not going to be their God. They're not going to be my people. Remember? And then remember when the kingdom split And you had Jeroboam up there, and he cast off the Levites out of the land of Israel. And we saw that definition begin to unfold last week. Well, now what you're going to see is that same issue of casting off, and now the remnant are going to be told, God has cast you off. He's disinherited you. He's against you. And unfortunately, and we're going to read it, some of the members of the believing remnant are going to believe it. And they're going to begin to question what they believe and what they were taught. And that's why, now, let me just, again, come over and make this parallel issue. Folks, this is why this can't just be data in your head. It has to start there, but it can't stay there. You've got to understand this is the way this thing works in a very parallel way there, and it's going to work in a very similar way in the dispensation of grace, because as you well know, when Satan turns his policy of evil against us because we do cast off the works of darkness, God is not going to put his hand between us and those issues of suffering. And believe you me, there are plenty of people I'm talking about members of the body of Christ who will be in churches that aren't doing what we're doing, and they're going to be looking at us and saying, that is God judging you guys. And let me tell you what that is meant to do. It's meant to make you question the doctrine and back off. That's what it's meant to do. It's meant to make you stop casting off Satan's works of darkness. It's meant to make you temper yourself a little bit, or just stop altogether. And then it works to create doubt. That's why I keep telling you, if you're not fully persuaded of what the Scripture says, you will come to a point where you throw in the towel. You have to be persuaded. That's why I pointed out the thing with Job. If he slay me, yet will I serve him. That's an incredible thing to say. And this is not going to be done with the stiff upper lip or some kind of human bravado. This is going to have to be done because you see some things in the Scripture that you know are true, and you're going to begin thinking out of that doctrine and living out of that doctrine regardless of the things that come your way because of it. So what you better start doing is looking at it and saying, when I suffer those things, it's a pretty good indicator I'm on the right track. Because for these folks, now by the way, God is not just leaving them out there to buy into the lie, the remnant out here in the day of wrath. He's not, you know why? Because He's explaining this whole process, just like I'm explaining it to you now. Look, this is a pretty good group, and I know we all know why we're here. But I'm going to tell you again that this lie is going to work on some. Yes. It's going to work on some of us. And the only way, and there's no way for me to know who that's going to be, but I will tell you this, the only thing that is going to carry us through that is to be absolutely persuaded that what we have been told in this book is true, and that we understand why. And I'm not going to leave you to guess about that. We won't get to it tonight. But when I finish this up and we come back the next time, I'm going to give you 15 or more reasons why it happens like that. So that you're not going to look at this and say, well, I feel like we got the short end of the stick, or I sure wish God was doing something else. Instead, you're going to be looking at what really is going to go on in you in the midst of all of that, and you're going to see by that what is happening with you is way more important than God delivering you from those things. Something eternal that absolutely cannot be put in you any other way. And we've got to come to grips with that. And that's why I'm taking the time to go through the detail on this, because these days are coming for us. And I don't want us to get intimidated, because that's going to be one of the issues. That's why you find Paul saying over and over again, for I am not ashamed. He says it early in the book of Romans, and he says it in some other places, because this attack is meant to make you ashamed of the doctrine. That's why when I was explaining this one time to a lady, and she was listening, I was trying to do it I was trying to come at it from a way that she could have some point of reference and carry my thought through, and it must have succeeded, because when I got so far along, she said, wait a minute. If I understand, if what you're saying is true, and she said, I'm not saying it's not, but if what you're saying is true, then a whole lot of what we've been learning is wrong. And now I have a choice to make. I'm either going to be ashamed of the doctrine. So, but it's not about, you know what? When she says that, I went, you're absolutely right. Now, she understood that issue. But for her, she couldn't go any further. She said, no, I just can't. And then you know what you begin thinking? Can all of these radio preachers be wrong? What about these guys that have taught the Bible all these years? I could name those names of those guys that everybody reverenced and thought well of. And look, I'm not trying to throw them under the bus, but I'm just trying to say that they're going to be used as the leverage to reject the truth. You can name the TV preachers. Well, they don't all agree. But I will tell you this, they will all agree against this doctrine. They will all do that. You had better decide once and for all that you're either in or you're out, because this sonship will find you out. You can't fake it. Believe me, when the heat turns up, there's where we are. Now, I don't say that mildly, and I don't mean to scare you with it. I'm just trying to be factual. I'm trying to stay in the middle of the road here. You're going to be given everything that you need about that, but I am going to tell you that it's coming and there are decisions to make. So there's this lie that's being told to them, and I want us to pay attention to it, because it's going to run very closely to something that's going to be done for us. The message from the apostate nation is going to be this: we are the true Israel, and you guys are the mavericks and the rebels. And if you don't believe it, look at what's happening to you and look at what's happening to us. And they're gonna bank on that. Now, by the way, and then the remnant is going to come along and say, just because you're born of the seed of Abraham doesn't make you the true Israel. You're going to have to believe that the historical Jesus of Nazareth was the Christ. Can you hear the cries of heresy? If you say that, what will be the response to that? Oh my goodness. So they're going to, and by the way, that's a hard message. Let me give you an illustration. I went to school, when I first went to Bible college, I went to a Bible Institute and a seminary over in East Texas. But then after they kicked me out, I went to, true story, they kicked me out, but not because I was bad. You know what? Let me take 30 seconds to tell you that. Because I was witnessing on the streets in Henderson, Texas. And some 3 guys come down the street, and I was witnessing. I was trying to witness to these guys on the street. I said, hey, you guys got a minute? And they said, yeah. I said, if you died today, where would you spend eternity? And they go, I don't know. And I go, well, if I could show you, would you like to know? And they went, okay. Well, here comes 2 of the older classmen from the school I recognized come down the sidewalk. And I said, hey, each one of you guys want to take one of these guys and we can deal with them one-on-one instead of, 3. And they looked at me like I had leprosy. And they just went on. Well, they must have reported it to the dean, because he called me into the office the next day and he said, what in the world are you doing? And I said, what are you talking about? He said, we have reports that you were out on the... I said, yeah, I was witnessing to 3 guys. These 2 guys came by and they wouldn't... He said, if I ever hear about you doing that again, you're out of here. Now, I thought, wait a minute, it's a Bible Institute, right? Okay, so I was out. So I go up to Lynchburg, and I go to school up there. Remember, Jerry Falwell started a school up there. Well, Jerry started a political organization called the Moral Majority. Does anybody remember that? And I remember he was in an interview with Phil Donahue, who is not exactly a believer. And Phil Donahue said this to Jerry because he wanted to get him to kind of be lenient about this. He said, so if I'm not a member of the moral majority, then I guess I must be a member of the immoral minority. And Jerry, you didn't want to offend anybody. He said, no, that's not what that means. And he would do that. Well, look, I don't want to discuss the moral majority because I didn't start that and I don't really know all the details of it. But if you're part of the believing remnant, when someone comes along and says, oh, if I don't believe that Jesus you believe in is the Christ, I guess I'm going to hell. Here's the right answer. Yes. Yes, and if you say, well, they err, but maybe I'll do like Joel Osteen and I'll just pad this down so nobody gets their feelings hurt. And you know what? The policy of evil has successfully made you back off. You're not casting out anything. You've become now a victim of the policy of evil, and the sad part of it is you think you're so wise and spiritual. The enemy buffaloed you into being, well, I don't really know. I mean, just because people don't receive Jesus doesn't mean they're going to hell. What Bible are you reading? If you want to make it up okay, enough of that. My only point is that there's going to come a point where you're going to have to say it. Bob? Theological correctness. Yeah. So here's the believing remnant. And they're going to say, we're the true Israel, and you guys are in apostasy. Now you can imagine the outcry that's going to come for that. So when the lie starts up that the believing remnant is really in rebellion against God and God is punishing them, there's not going to be a whole lot of physical evidence to demonstrate otherwise. And so that thing is going to have some success. And as a matter of fact, I want to talk about the Gentile nations just for a couple of sentences. What is going to happen is of such a nature that even the Gentile nations are going to look at that and say about this remnant, God has cast you off. That's going to be their perspective on this. And if you're a member of the remnant and the Gentiles are saying God has disinherited you, and the apostate nation is saying God is punishing you, and we're the true Israel, come back. Get involved with the sacrifices. It's Moses, it's the law of Moses. Come on. And then you're going to lose your family. And then you won't be able to take the mark. And then you won't be able to buy or sell. And there are some that are going to look at all of that and go, well, I don't know. Maybe we don't need to be in such a hurry about this. Maybe we don't need to be so dogmatic. Now, why am I saying this to you? Because this is the time to say it to you now, not when we're in the middle of it. So let me be clear about it now. I will always be dogmatic about this issue in Romans 13. This is not something we nuance politically, and this is not a thing with a lot of gray areas. We are either casting off the works of darkness and putting on the armor of light, which both of those have to go together, or we're not. It's not like a little bit. It's like being dead or pregnant. You can't be a little bit of it. You either are or aren't. So this is the way this is. And I'm telling you that now. So you will waste your breath when you come to me later and say, don't you think you need to back off of that a little bit? The answer will be no. No. And I'm going to remind you, I told you about this. I'm also going to remind you, you amen me when I said it. So here we are. But this is the easy time to do it. Because, boy, when we're in the middle of it, if I haven't introduced it to you by then, that's going to be a hard sell. All right, so here we are. Psalm 43. Now, I did all of that just to set us up here because we're going to be looking at this issue of the effect of the lie that's being told by the apostate nation. So Psalm 43, look with me in verse 1. Judge me, O God, and plead my cause against an ungodly nation. You know what he's talking about. He's talking about this group right here. Okay? Oh, deliver me from the deceitful and unjust man. And so when he begins to talk to us about that that ungodly nation is apostate Israel. Let's read this next one, verse 2. For thou art the God of my strength. Why dost thou cast me off? Do you see that terminology? They're saying, God, in front of everybody, you've abandoned us here. Why have you cast us off? You're supposed to be delivering us out here. That's not happening. And so they're wondering about, why go I mourning because of the oppression of the enemy? Oh, send out thy light and thy truth. Let them lead me. Let them bring me unto thy holy hill, into thy tabernacles. Then will I go unto the altar of God. Unto God my exceeding joy. Yea, upon the harp will I praise thee, O God, my God. Why art thou cast down, O my soul? And why art thou disquieted within me? Hope in God, for I shall yet praise him, who is the health of my countenance and my God. Now, there's a whole lot packed in here. I need to cover it kind of in a hurry. But here's the thing. Do you see the same? You didn't use the word confusion here, but do you notice the same thing happening here? God, why have you cast us off? Why am I disquieted? Why am I so full of anxiety? By the way, I'm going to give you something really good. And again, we won't get to it today, but we'll get to it the next time. Because one of the things that will happen to you, remember in those things over there, for whoso separate us from the love of Christ shall tribulation, shall distress, shall persecutions. Remember they had that list of 8 things, they progressed in nature. Those first tribulations are mental in nature. They're supposed to work in your head up here, get you to start doubting the doctrine, get you to back off a little bit. Don't get serious about this thing. That's what it's intended to do, to intimidate you. And so when those things begin to happen, that's one of the things you'll start wondering about is, why is this happening to me? The reason I'm explaining it now is so you will know exactly why it's happening to you. So you won't ask that. Not every member of the remnant will ask that question or be confused. Even, is it possible for a member of the remnant to be told, hey, there's some things that's going to happen that's going to make you wonder if you're really on God's side or not? Is it possible to tell them that, and yet when it comes, they still doubt? Yeah, absolutely. So just because I'm telling you isn't going to make it magically happen for us either. What's going to happen is we're going to have to really understand the issue. And out of that understanding, we're going to trust or rest in that understanding because we know what is happening and why it's happening. And you know what that's going to do? That is going to produce something in you that you're going to need badly, and that is the peace of God that passeth all understanding. And that thing is not done by wishful thinking. We are going to look at it over in the book of Philippians. That thing is produced because of a pattern of edification that's given over there in Philippians chapter 4. I am going to go over and I'm going to talk to you about that issue because if you don't have the peace of God, when that time comes, look, let me just tell you how this thing, here's the way the thing starts. He talks about be careful for nothing. That word careful, when you see that FUL as a suffix or a prefix, like in fulfill, when you see that FUL, if you want to understand what the Bible is saying about that, flip those terms. Don't be full of care. When it says be careful for nothing, it's saying that don't be full of care. What does full of care mean? Give me a synonym. Worry. What else? Anxious, anxiety. Right, what else? Those are all great. Anything else? Doubtful. Fearful. All of those things. You know what those are? Those are the things that make you worry. And by the way, when you get this peace, we'll talk about it, you're not going to get some peace that you're going to conjure up. He's going to give you His peace. By the way, He said the same thing to the believing remnant that Paul is going to say to us. Remember what Jesus said? My peace I give unto you. Listen to the rest of this verse. Not as the world giveth. And then Paul is going to come along and say, and you're going to get the peace of God. Well, let me ask you this. How worried is he? Do you think God's up there wringing his hands going, oh, I sure hope this works? No. When you look, I'm not saying you won't suffer. I'm saying he is going to give you the peace that passeth all understanding. This is an incredible thing. And when you get that, Satan looks at that and thinks, wait a minute, this isn't affecting them the way it was supposed to. And that's when you become more than conquerors. See, all of these issues we've covered before, they're about to tie into this issue here. All right, so let's see. I kind of got off on that, and it's not really in the notes. Let me see where we were, because I don't really remember here. Okay, well, anyway, so here's what's going to happen. The believing remnant is going to be instructed in what's going to be happening here in the remaining portion of Satan's night. They're going to be told about that. They're going to be told about the circumstances of Daniel's 70th week and the things that are going to be unfolding there. They do know that there is a deliverance, but if they pay attention to the doctrine and respond properly to the doctrine, they're also going to understand there is a period of time here in the beginning that they are not going to see that deliverance. Don't let that make you say, why has God cast us off? The same thing is going to be true for us. These are mental troubles that are going to come our way. All right, now, there's something else I wanted to talk about here before we move on to this next thing. Oh, by the way, there's a benefit for them in this suffering as well, just like there's a benefit for us, and they're going to need that benefit. But here's the kicker. This one is great. By not delivering them, if you're the adversary, you have brought your man. By the way, he earned the right to bring that man of sin into the world, right? So he does all that. The world has received him. His works of darkness are doing what they're supposed to do. And now the believing remnant is actually being successfully persecuted by him. If you're Satan, what are you thinking? I'm winning this thing. And part of the wisdom of God is allowing Satan to be caught in his own devices. He is leading him to pursue a path that he thinks is victory, but it leads ultimately to his destruction. And he's causing him to make decisions. This is really, when you see this, this is the genius of God. And so Satan is going to pursue this path after the remnant, and the remnant is supposed to know that. You are supposed to know something similar. That as Satan is not going to be stopped from attacking us in various ways as we progress through the education, there is something taking place that actually, it doesn't just allow us to endure what he's doing, it actually benefits us, not just now, but also in eternity. And again, we'll look at all those things. I'm going to spell all that out so you won't have to guess about all that. And so God is going to undo everything that Satan is doing. So now let me take you to this next one, Psalm 43:5, and I'm going to work through that passage real quickly. Why art thou cast down, O my soul, and why art thou disquieted within me? Hope in God, for I shall yet praise him. There is coming a time where, are they going to see that deliverance? Yes, they are. Are they going to see that avenging? Yes, they are. Are they going to see that king and his kingdom? And you know what? And so when God does do the things that he says he's going to do, there is going to be praise. And they say, you know what? I shall yet. That's the thing. This thing is, I know there'll be opportunity to praise him for those things. Now, let's look at this next Psalm, 44. We have heard, they're going to give a testimony of things God has done in the past. We have heard with our ears, O God. Our fathers have told us what work thou didst in their days, in the times of old, how thou didst drive out the heathen with thy hand and plantest them, how thou didst afflict the people and cast them out. For they got not the land in possession by their own sword, neither did their own arm save them, but thy right hand and thine arm and the light of thy countenance, because thou hast a favor unto them. Thou art my king, O God. Command deliverances for Jacob. Do you see what they're saying? God, we heard how you did this. We heard how you did that. We saw it wasn't in their swords or their bed. It was you. It was you. So now what we need you to do is Psalm 44, command deliverances for Jacob. We're looking for these deliverances, and that's what they're after. And now, let's see. I don't want to get off these notes because, oh, you got to be kidding. Really? Okay. Psalm 44:5. Through thee will we push down our enemies. It's talking about a time they're going to fight with the Messiah, but we'll talk about that another time. Through thy name we will tread them under that rise up against us. For I will not trust in my bow, neither shall my sword save me. But thou hast saved us from our enemies and hast put them to shame that hated us. In God we boast all the day long and praise thy name forever. Selah. Now verses 4 and 5 are actually going to be the antidote for what they're thinking when they're out there and they are actually going through the suffering. And I'm going to say this one last time here. If they're not paying attention to the doctrine, if they're not really looking when these things happen, it won't work for them. They are going to begin to doubt. Psalm 44:9. But thou hast cast off and put us to shame, and goest not forth with our armies. Thou makest us to turn back from the enemy, and they which hate us spoil for themselves. Thou hast given us like sheep appointed for meat, and hast scattered us among the heathen. Thou sellest thy people for naught, and dost not increase thy wealth by their price. Thou makest us a reproach to our neighbors, a scorn and a derision to them that are round about us. Thou makest us a byword among the heathen, a shaking of the head among the people. My confusion is continually before me, and the shame of my face hath covered me. For the voice of him that reproacheth and blasphemeth by reason of the enemy and the avenger. Now, we did see these terms show up here. And no wonder he's saying, hey, command deliverances for Jacob. Hey, everything's going wrong for us here. It looks like you've forsaken us. And you've disinherited, you're disassociating yourselves from us. That's the thing that the remnant is in danger of thinking. Now, I want to pull that back to us for a moment. Give me that Romans chapter 8. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? By the way, when they're out there, you know what they're thinking? God must be against us. You should never think that. And here's the verse. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or peril or sword? As it is written, for thy sake we are killed all the day long. We're accounted as sheep for the slaughter. That's how you think when you're thinking wrong. That's why this next word is the strongest no possible in your Bible. Nay, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him that loved us. Don't ever get to thinking that when you're going through these things that God is now against you, that somehow now he doesn't love you anymore, that now somehow he's forsaken you, or he's cast you off, or disassociating himself from you. See, knowing what's happening is the difference right here. That's why this doctrine is the only thing that'll make a difference. I will tell you this, a motivational speech will not do it when those times come. This is going to require knowledge of what God is doing. Now let's go to Psalm 60 very quickly. Well, you know what? I highlighted that and it's important. Remember what? Take me back to that, Trent. Let me just see it. For I am persuaded. And then you list all these things that neither death, though he slay me, yet will I serve him, Job said. Nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, things present, things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other creature shall be able to separate us from the love of God. You'll never need to wonder about that. Paul was fully persuaded of that. Do you think when he was writing the letter to the Philippians, when he was in the dungeon at Rome, do you think that when he was writing that he was thinking, well, you know, I think God's mad at me? You don't find that kind of thing happening. He knows. He's been persuaded. And it's not just positive thinking that Dale Carnegie's early ancestors wrote. It was the doctrine. That's what convinced him. All right, now, Psalm 60, verse 1. Thou hast cast us off, thou scatterest, thou hast been displeased. O turn thyself to us again. Do you see that? Oh, God's angry with us. He's upset. This is working for some of the members of the remnant. And this is the thing that's coming out of that. And now, what, verse 8? Look at this. Moab is my washpot. Over Edom will I cast my shoe. Philistia, triumph thou because of me. Who will bring me into the strong city? Now notice, this is Psalm 60. Now you're over into the Avenger Psalms. And you're going to, he's going to go back and he's going to review some of the doubt. But now you're going to see deliverances beginning to take place. And then you're going to see the change. It's not going to be a constant parade of, oh, God, command deliverances for Jacob. You're going to see it start out that way, and then you're going to see it begin to change. So look here. It says, who will bring me into the strong city? Who will lead me into Edom? Wilt not thou, O God, which hadst cast us off? That's a past tense deal, isn't it? And thou, O God, which didst not go out with our armies, give us help from trouble, for vain is the help of man. Through God we shall do valiantly, for he it is that shall tread down our enemies. And now I want to take you over to Psalm 74. O God, why hast thou cast us off forever? Now look, there's the start of that again. Why doth thine anger smoke against the sheep of thy pasture? Remember thy congregation which thou hast purchased of old, the rod of thine inheritance which thou hast redeemed, this Mount Zion wherein thou hast dwelt. Lift up thy feet under the perpetual desolations, even all that the enemy hath done wickedly in the sanctuary. Thine enemies roar in the midst of thy congregations. They set up their ensigns for signs. Now let's drop down to verse 8. They said in their hearts, let us destroy them together. They have burned up all the synagogues of God in the land. We see not our signs. There is no more any prophet, neither is any among us that knoweth how long. O God, how long shall the adversity reproach? Shall the enemy blaspheme thy name forever? Why withdrawest thou thy hand, even thy right hand? Pluck it out of thy bosom. You see, this thing is still going on, but now we're going to see Psalm 77. And we're almost where we need to be. Wilt the Lord cast off forever? Will he be favorable no more? Is his mercy clean gone forever? Doth his promise fail forevermore? Hath God forgotten to be gracious? Hath he in his anger shut up his tender mercies? You know what? This is where they are out here. When they're out here in this and they're looking at what's happening right here, they're going to be looking, it looks like maybe they were right. And now we're going to see the Psalms progress to a fact where now that is going to reverse. Because now we're going to get over here. Psalm 94. O Lord God, to whom vengeance belongeth, O God, to whom vengeance belongeth, show thyself. And now I'm going to drop you down to verse 14, because now they're no longer asking, why have you cast us off? Now they're saying, for the Lord will not cast off his people. Do you see how that progressed? Look, I kind of apologize. I know we jumped through a lot of stuff to try to get us over here, and right here at the end, I'm looking at this clock, and I'm really trying to get us there. Your notes will do a little more full job of filling in the detail. But look, the Lord will not cast off his people, neither will he forsake his inheritance, but judgment shall return unto righteousness. The upright in heart shall follow it. And so we see all of this. Drop down to verse 16. Who will rise up for me against the evildoers, or who will stand up for me against the workers of iniquity? Unless the Lord had been my help, my soul had almost dwelt in silence. But if you're going to cast off the works of darkness, the one thing you cannot be is what? Silent. It's going to have to be a public repudiation of those works of darkness. And that's what's going to happen for us as well. Well, I've got 1 minute and 9 seconds left, and I don't know that I can get all this in. So let me read 2 verses to you, and I think we'll do it right here. 2 Chronicles 36:15. And the Lord God of their fathers sent to them by his messengers, rising up betimes and sending, because he had compassion on his people and on his dwelling place. But they mocked the messengers of God and despised his words and misused his prophets until the wrath of the Lord arose against his people till there was no remedy. Remember, they crossed that line, no return. And now I'm going to drop you down to, I'm going to take you over to Hosea, because this is the same kind of issue in Hosea 8. Verse 1, set the trumpet to thy mouth. He shall come as an eagle against the house of the Lord, because they have transgressed my covenant and trespassed against my law. Israel shall cry unto me, my God, we know thee. Israel hath cast off the thing that is good. The enemy shall pursue him. And when he talks about Israel has cast off the thing that is good, I think he's talking about several things. First of all, they're casting off the sound doctrine that God gave them when they threw the word of the Lord behind their back. I think that thing that was good is the prophets that we just mentioned in that other passage, that they persecuted, that God sent to tell them. God besought them and pleaded with them, and they wouldn't turn for all of that. And then finally, there was no remedy, and the fifth course of punishment came upon them. That's the good that Israel cast off before the Lord. Now, here's all I want to do right here at the end. I want to make an application of all this. As we cast off the works of darkness, by seeing what it means to cast off and looking at all these different illustrations, we're going to do some things so that they can be heard to express our disdain for Satan's works of darkness. We're going to be saying some things that show that we are disassociating ourselves from those kinds of things, and we are going to publicly reflect God's attitude toward those works of darkness. Now, you might be thinking, how in the world do we do that without offending anybody? You cannot. You cannot. I'm not saying you need to go out of your way to be offensive. You will be offensive enough without that. But you're going to have to be plain and clear about it. And that's what's going to be involved in casting off the works of darkness. Now, it's at the end of these notes, but I'm going to use it to start the next session because we're right here almost at the end. And what I want to do is I want to define now the second part of this, and that is the issue of let us put on the armor of light. So we'll start with that after the break.